Hey everyone, this is Cameron with Mode, and today I have with me Aaron Anderton.
Hi there.
So glad to have you here. Just a little bit about Aaron. So I have written down high school football state champion, which I do want to talk a little bit about.
Okay.
I'm sure that has led you into powerlifting and strongman a bit.
Mhm.
2001 USAPL Washington State super heavyweight champ.
Yeah, it's a big boy.
Yes, still are. Still pretty big. 2004 Washington Strongest Man champion.
Mhm.
And you beat Brian Shaw
Mhm.
at the
2006.
2006 Monsters of the Midwest Strongman contest. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. 2009 Push-Pull National Champion. So, another powerlifting championship there. 2011 Mr. Olympia Pro Deadlift Champion.
Yep.
And what are some of your best lifts?
So for powerlifting, my best raw squat I did in 2007, 650. And actually in that particular one, I probably had another 50 pounds in me, but it was beyond my PR. And so it was my third attempt. I never even considered the idea that I could have done more of that meet because I was more focused on the bench and the deadlift. But
Yeah.
And then my best raw bench in contest or in competition is 550. And my best deadlift period, but it was raw also, was at 830.
Yeah, those numbers are insane. Having a 550 bench, like if someone deadlifts 550, that's a lot.
Yep.
Bench pressing it is insane.
Mhm.
So that's really cool. And then an 830-pound deadlift. That was in was that a powerlifting meet or a strongman competition?
It was in a powerlifting meet. So it was, powerlifting competition. It was the top raw deadlift in the country that year and the number 2 overall. To Brad Gillingham had the top overall. And he was a world champion USAPL powerlifter. So
Yeah, that's nuts. So when you did the 830, what was the world record at the time?
Oh, in powerlifting, I want to say it was. I don't remember if Andy Bolton had done his 1,000 yet. I'd have to look back and see. His was equipped. It was before the 1,015 that Benedict Magnuson did.
Okay.
So I want to say it was upper 900s, somewhere in there. And the bad thing about that year when I did the Mr. Olympia later that year is after I did the 830 in February, I got invited to the Mr. Olympia Pro Deadlift. And my training was going great. And based on my training, I could usually, whatever I got in training for my top lift, I'd get about 60 more in competition. Just because of the way I rested beforehand and the way I trained, I could usually open with whatever my heaviest that I did in training, that's what I would open with.
Wow.
And so I was expecting in my last training to hit about 830, 835 in the gym, and I was going to go for 880 to 900 in the competition is what I was hoping for. So I was going to be, at that time, I think 5 or 6 people had done 900 in competition.
Wow.
And so I wanted to be one of those guys, but I got injured on my very last deadlift workout before the Olympia.
No, the very last workout.
I was still able to eke out a win, but it was I only got my opener of 805, and it was hard. And I could just tell, I don't know how I came back. It was 10 days before the thing when I hurt my back. But
Man, I mean, hey, at least you've broken that 800. I feel like 800 is such a mark. And, maybe that's just in my mind, that's the next number I'm chasing, is where it's like when you're in the 500s, you're like, dude, I got to hit 6. And then you hit 600. And you're like, well, I have to hit 700. Like, that's where it really starts to get heavy. Then you hit 700. You're like, well, 700's not that good. It needs to be 800. So in my mind, having an 800 deadlift is just nuts.
I think that's how it goes. I mean, throughout my decades of competing, routinely every few years, I'd think that was my peak. That's as far as it's going to get. I might as well retire now. And I started saying that in my 20s. And when my max was 550 deadlift, and there's nothing more there. That's all it's going to be. Yeah. And if I could just someday get a 600, and then it was if I could someday get a 700, and it just kind of went that way. And every time you think you're done, and then you decide, well, I'll just give it one more shot, I would go just a little farther.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was for me. When did you start lifting?
I mean, I started lifting a little bit in the basement of my house when I was 12, and I got a little 110-pound barbell set. But I started lifting seriously my sophomore year in high school, and I was I guess I was 15 years old. So my sophomore year in high school, they had a weight training class, and that's the first time I actually started doing, regular squats and benches and stuff like that.
That's cool. So, and were you also, because you're big, I mean, you were built like traps, shoulders just huge.
I was
like,
skinny.
You were skinny?
So interesting. You mentioned the football thing, and that is what got me lifting, because my freshman year I played football, and I want to say 5'11", 150 pounds.
What?
And I wanted to be a running back, and everybody wanted to be a running back and a wide receiver. And so they needed some people to play on the line. So they talked me into playing center and defensive end. And so I was not what I wanted to do, but I was like, all right. So I kind of played and ended up doing pretty well at them. So my sophomore year comes around, and I was barely bigger. I was 6 feet tall and 160 pounds. And the coaches go, all right, everybody wants you to bench press your body weight as many reps as you can. Well, I weighed 160. I couldn't do 135. I needed help with it.
Oh, man.
And so, but then we started weight training, right? So I took that seriously, and my goal was I'm going to lift as heavy as I can every single workout. I'm going to eat as much food as I possibly can, which wasn't easy. We were very poor and got free lunch and all that kind of stuff, and there was not usually much food, but I would scavenge it wherever I could, get a free meal from wherever I could as often as I could.
Yeah.
And I ended up going in that school year from weighing 160 to 185 by the end of the school year.
Holy smokes.
And my bench from not getting 135 to doing 235 by the end of the school year.
Man, that's
so that kind of started it. My realization that if I really lift hard and eat a lot and really push it, I can get a lot better. And in the end, even before I gained all the weight, but at the beginning, I was good enough that I was one of 3 sophomores that got to play on the varsity, suit up for the varsity. I didn't get to play. The other 2 were wide receivers. I was the only lineman. Yeah. And I wasn't nearly big enough. But I got to, and then the next year got to start playing a lot more. So,
but it sounds like you had the athleticism part, and then you just got bigger. Did you keep lifting in high school and keep playing football?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and my senior year, halfway through my junior year, we moved to another school in another state, and it was a school that always did well in sports. And kind of the 2 high schools were recruiting me back and forth to which ones I wanted to go to.
Yeah.
And so I ended up having to take the one that I lived closer to. And it just so happened that was the one that was much better at sports. I didn't know that going in because I wasn't from there. For example, I don't know if you're familiar with Taysom Hill and the New Orleans Saints.
Yes, yeah.
He went to that high school. Long after I did, but he went to that high school.
Oh, cool. What high school was that?
Highland High School in Pocatello, Idaho.
Okay.
But they had just had a guy named Merrill Hodge played there and then played in Idaho State and went to the Steelers that next year. His younger brother was our quarterback, and he was honorable mention All-American. So it was a good school for sports.
Okay, yeah, that is a really good sport. Really good school for sports.
So I played baseball my junior year, and we got runner-up in the state championship. Then I played football, and we won the state championship. And, yeah, it was good.
Nice. Now, what did your weight training routine look like when you started as a sophomore? Because, I mean, you put on 100 pounds plus on your bench in that year.
Yep. It was a pretty simple process. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, bench press first, 5 sets of 5. And then if you have time, you can do some tricep, they call them French presses, but skull crushers, basically, or some bicep curls. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's what you do. Tuesday, Thursday, squat. And if you have time, you can do they teach you some calf raises or some kind of stiff-legged deadlifts type things. We never did regular deadlifts. We never did power cleans, really basic stuff. So that was my sophomore and junior year until I moved to that other high school. That other high school was it was a lot more like a college strength training. It had a much bigger variety of sports. They maxed on different things. You did power cleans, you did all these. But I wasn't introduced to that until after I moved, after my junior year.
That's cool, yeah. I find that while variety can be important in weight training, the most important thing are really just the basics, like bench, squat, deadlift, your cleans, overhead press, like those basic things. There was actually just a study that just came out, and it compared functional training to just typical weight training and sports performance. And I mean, this won't be a shock to either of us, but the guys who did weight training did better in their sports than the guys who did functional training.
For sure.
And it's so, because it's like, if you're trying to be better at soccer, well, when you're playing soccer, you get better directly at soccer. If you try to emulate that in the gym, it's really difficult.
Yep.
But if you squat hard, heavy, push yourself, you do lunges, straight leg deadlifts, whatever it is that you're doing, and you just get stronger, more explosive, then you're just going to kick the ball harder. You're going to move directions faster. And that's what they tested, like how fast athletes were able to move multi-directional and all these other ways. And anyway, it just turned out that the guys who were lifting were better. And so,
because the transfer of the strength, I think they try to do that in the gym, but the transfer comes from when you're practicing your sport. So
Yes.
you got stronger, and your body adapts it to the sport when you practice the sport.
yes.
Trying to do this halfway in between thing doesn't work. When I was training my son for football and then later for track when he was in high school, his high school has a they like to do a lot of those things. They had special classes that were just for the functional type stuff, and then they had regular weight training stuff. And usually I would either have him doing something that didn't necessarily match up with what they were doing, or we just stopped doing those classes and he would come do that with me, because for the very reason I told him, being stronger will make you better more than anything else. Get as strong as humanly possible. And even though he wasn't the biggest guy out there, he was one of the strongest, and it ended up making the difference for him to be able to do things he shouldn't have been able to do at his size.
100%. Yeah, I felt like for me, lifting, it was very similar to you. It completely changed my sports performance. Where when I wrestled 160, and I actually weighed 158, so I didn't even have to cut.
Yeah.
But I benched 300. I held the dip record at like 84 dips. I can't remember my squat, but I remember it was mid 300. So it wasn't great actually, but it was at least decent for like a 158-pound wrestler. And anyway, when you just move that amount of weight in comparison to the other guys, your performance is just going to be way better. So when I work with athletes now, it's same thing. You know, it's focusing on weight training rather than like the fancy cool things and like, oh, I do this little movement over here and this and that. Like, dude, just hit the weights. It's normal.
Yeah, and I maybe because I learned it when I was young, but I always kind of gravitated to more of the power stuff, even when I wasn't the strongest one. Years ago, I remember watching a TV show called Flex Appeal, which was basically on ESPN. They started, this is early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. They would put on, they had a couple of regular hosts, which was a retired professional bodybuilder and then a fitness girl, that were kind of lifting. And then they would bring on different professional bodybuilders to train with them periodically. So, the guys that I like to watch at the time, you had Sean Ray was one of the regulars that was on the show, but then you had Kevin Levrone was one of my favorites that came on the show. There were a lot of different ones. And what I liked about him was he was all about big weight. Like everything he did, he'd do a big lift and he'd go boom. And then he'd get up there and he'd be like, gotta add more weight. Come on, man, just add more weight all the time. And I thought it was hilarious, but he was known for being very, very strong, and he was very muscular.
That's awesome. Now, you looking up to those guys, I did when I was younger as well. Did you ever think about going into the bodybuilding realm, or
That's
were
how
you?
I started as in 1994. My first contest, first thing I did was a bodybuilding contest, the Rocky Mountain Championships, which were here in Spokane. And I remember at the time, because I lifted heavy all the time, and the gym owner and people would tell me, "Oh man," they would come up and go, "Oh, are you a powerlifter?" or ask me to do powerlifting, and I was so offended all the time. I'm not a powerlifter. I'm a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
All the time. It used to drive me nuts. I didn't try anything powerlifting related until 96. So I was 26. So I'd been lifting since I was 14, football up until I got into the Marine Corps. And then I was basically just doing it for bodybuilding up until 96 when I got talked into doing a bench contest.
And how did that go? How'd your first bench contest go?
It was pretty good. My very first one was a sanctioned one, too. I didn't just do a gym one. So I went to Pendleton, Oregon, and I want to say it was USPF, but it was Gus Frethwich put it on, and he's the owner and founder of Wobdle. But at the time, he hadn't created that yet. And so he'd put it on in Pendleton, Oregon, and I went down there, and I was competing in the, I feel like it was a novice division, and I probably weighed in at about 275, 280, something like that. And just raw, because there were bench shirts then, but I didn't know anything about them, and that was like my first exposure to seeing some of that stuff, and
Yeah.
seeing the extreme arches and all that kind of stuff that I was watching people going, whoa, I don't know what these guys are doing. I've just been lifting in the gym.
Yeah.
But I believe I got in that first contest, I did 440 and won the novice, and I was happy about it.
Yeah. Usually when you bench 440 in a novice, you kind of destroy.
But I mean, I'd been doing that in the gym for a year and a half or so and so I wasn't, it was a good lift, but it wasn't like, wow, I achieved some great thing. And there was another guy there who did 490 with a bench shirt on. Although I will say the bench shirts in those days were not much. They didn't do, especially the single ply ones, you might get 30, 40 pounds tops out of them.
Yeah.
But he did the 490 and I was blown away. Like, man, I hope someday I could do that. And there was a guy there doing the deadlift that I knew, but I knew who he was, but I never really talked to him. It was Brent Meixel, right?
Yes.
And he did a 725 deadlift there, and I couldn't believe it. This biggest weight I'd ever seen moved. I thought it was the most amazing thing in the world. I want to do that someday.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Yeah, we just had him on.
I know. I've known him since I came back, got out of the Marines. So since the end of 92, early 93, we're at the same gym, but we didn't really run in the same circles. I competed against him. I wasn't directly against him in 96 because I did bench and he only did deadlift that day, I think. But later on in like 2000, we did the Washington State Championships, powerlifting championships against each other. But I never trained with him until the end of 2002 and early 2003. We were training partners for a little while.
And how did that go? How was it you guys pushing each other? Because obviously your big strength seems to be the deadlift, and bench is also really good. And his was very much the squat.
Absolutely. I don't know if it helped him or not. But for me, it was I did push him in those areas. I don't know if he cared. He's not the kind of guy that shows you if it bugged him that I would outdo him on a lift or whatever. So you'd have to ask him if it ever actually affected him. But for me, it was helpful. I learned what I really was interested in seeing was how does someone, because at that point, he had just set the world record in the squat for the first time. In October of 2002, I think it was, he had done 1,041, and I believe it was Ed Cohn's record that he beat at that time. At the time, him and Steve Goggins and Ed Cohn were kind of going back and forth on squat records. And he had just done that for the first time, and so he's on the cover of magazines, and I had known who he was, but we never really worked out. So this is, talking to him day after day and lifting and kind of picking his brain on how he approaches things. One of the things that I saw was how much time and effort and dedication it took. And I realized, this is no slight to him, we had different approaches. I learned a lot from him, but I also realized it's not for me. That level of dedication in lifting wasn't for me. I liked to be more balanced. And I won't say it's better. I've always tried to spend a lot of time with my family. My job was important to me, not because I liked it, but because I knew it provided a way to support my family. And so those things were non-negotiable for me. And then lifting, I loved it, but I always saw it as a hobby. I like it. I want to be as good as I can, but within these parameters, right?
Yeah.
And most top lifters, and they'll tell you maybe that's why they become top lifters, they don't see it that way. They're like, whatever it takes, I will do whatever it takes. And I remember being with him. He was a full-time teacher, and he would teach all day long. And then he'd come to the gym, and we'd meet up. And over the course of my time lifting, the vast majority of my workouts have been an hour or less, all the time, whether it's bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, whatever. And I read early on that after 45 minutes, your natural testosterone comes down. And I also liked Dorian Yates's Blood and Guts, which was one or two sets to failure. And so I had always kind of gotten into the brief, hard, and then rest. And it tied in with my personality of not wanting to spend too much time there. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was a good fit. That's not how most guys do it, and that's certainly not how he did it. And so our workouts would be 2 hours. I thought was insane, right? But I would do it because I'm with this guy and he knows what he's doing. But for me, it was hard. I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, okay, we've been here a while. I got to get home,
Yeah.
And like I said, that's not a criticism of him. But for me, I always put those limits on myself, and I was like, this is too much time. Whereas, that's just what he did. And I would leave at 2 hours. He'd still be going.
Man.
And then he'd tell me, and he'd stay, well, I got a few more things to do. And he had another workout partner, Agner Adelsteinson, who was a regular partner for years. And they would both stay there and work out for who knows how much longer after I was gone. And then he'd go home late at night, eat, do whatever he had to do, sleep probably only like 5 or 6 hours at most, and go back to work the next day.
Man.
It was brutal. And at that time, of course, he was going for the squat record, which means you're eating a lot, you're trying to get as big as possible.
Yeah.
And, we're getting him in his equipment, and it's painful for him. People who haven't lifted equipped a lot of people think they call it the easy way. It isn't anything but. It is the most painful, difficult kind of lifting you can do. Raw is easy. You don't lift as much weight, but raw is relatively painless compared to the other stuff. And so when you're getting him in his briefs that you have to help get him in this, which is kind of like a half squat suit, you're pulling these on, and then he's getting his squat suit bottoms on, and then you're wrapping his knees about as tight enough like a tourniquet so his legs are red and blue below and above it.
Yeah.
And then pulling up the straps, and then having a special belt. And they didn't have he had a special belt closer that would hook into the holes and just wrench it shut super tight like he was about to explode. And then he'd get under 1,000+ pounds, or a little less, 900, but a couple hundred and something pounds of chains and bands or whatever on the bar.
Yeah.
And do a rep, and then stand there, try not to pass out for a little while, sit down, undo the whole thing. And it was exciting for me to see that and participate in that, but it was also eye-opening to the level of dedication that someone needs to do when they're going to break that kind of a record. And I was like, that's really cool. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, to break a world record, be the top in the world, yeah, you do have to sacrifice so much.
I'll throw in there, it worked, right? Because this is October when we start training in 2002, and he had done 1,041, best ever by anybody ever. Any organization, didn't matter. It was the top all time. March of the next year, so a few months later, that's what he was training for, the Arnold Classic. He broke his own record. He did 1,075. So he bumped it up by over 30 pounds in 3 months. It worked, and he was the man, and he's winning the Arnold Classic. And I remember working out with him at the time, and someone coming up to us while we're lifting because they saw him and wanted him to sign the cover of their magazine. They had me sign it too just because I was with them. So, I'm not in there, but all right.
That's awesome. Now, what gym was this that you guys were training together?
It was Giorgio's back in the day, and he's in a different spot now. I don't even know if he even owns a gym anymore, but in Spokane, Giorgio Usai had a gym called Giorgio's Fitness or Giorgio's Gym at different times throughout the 80s, 90s, early 2000s and plus. And he had been a powerlifter, and he always had this gym, although I always felt like he was kind of walking a line between his powerlifter roots and trying to fit in with the fitness crowd because there's no money in the powerlifting.
100%.
And so he was kind of walking a line, but he made the Forza benches. That's his company, or was. So those were his invention, his company, all the Forza benches and all the top squat racks and all that kind of stuff. The power racks were really good. So he had really good equipment and deadlift platforms and all that. So if you were a powerlifter, you wanted to work out there in those days.
Man, that's really cool. And how many powerlifting meets did you do before you went in the Strongman? And did you start doing them simultaneously?
It was pretty close to simultaneously. My first powerlifting was a bench only in 96. I did bench again in the beginning of 97. My younger brother competed too. And he was I'm 6'3", he's 6'4". He's 8 years younger, and I think he weighed like 210. He was just joined the Army. He was 19 years old, really skinny, but he was a good deadlifter, and we'd been working out together. And leading up to that, my best deadlift was 545, and his was 495. In that contest, because that was our last workout before we went to the contest, in the contest, he did 562 and won, and I was like, where did that come from, right? And I remember Gus Rethwich, who came up to me and to him after, he goes, man, you should be deadlifting too. I'll bet you're a great deadlifter. And I was like, that's more than he just did more than I've ever done. But that kind of planted a seed like, well, if my little brother can do that, there's no way he's stronger than me. He weighed 210, I was like 285, and I've been lifting for years. I don't know, now I need to work on my deadlift.
Yeah.
And so that was 97. 98 comes around, and Gus Rethwich puts out that he's going to start strongman contests. And it had probably only been on TV for a couple of years at that point where they started playing all these old World's Strongest Man contests. So I just started being exposed to watching World's Strongest Man, watching the ones from the 70s and the early 80s with Bill Kazmaier, and then they did John Paul Sigmarsson and all that. And Gus Rethwich was in the first World's Strongest Man against Franco Colombo, Lou Ferrigno, and all that whole group back in the day.
Yeah.
And he was in Arnold's movie, The Running Man, Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie back in the day. So he's this powerlifting guy who did strongman, and he decides he's going to start the Northwest Strongest Man contest in Bend, Oregon, which is where he was living at the time, and invited all kinds of people. And back then, there was no national strongman thing in the United States. There was no organized. There were a few competitions like his just cropping up, but nobody was really doing them. It was just like, we saw him on TV, let's try it.
Yeah.
So he throws it out, and he's like, you want to do it? And I go, yeah. I saw that stuff on TV. It looks cool, right? So he kind of threw out what events were going to be there. And I remember there was going to be a keg lift. And in the 70s, they filled up like a beer keg, and they had liquid in it or sand or whatever, and they tried to lift it over their head. And so I looked around someplace and found a place that had an empty beer keg, and then put some sand and some fluid in it and tried to get it to be about, I don't know how much weight, 220 pounds or something. I don't know what and got it, put it in my backyard. And there was going to be a log. I think there was going to be a keg lift. There was probably going to be some farmer's walk, but nobody had any of that equipment around. And he was just kind of making stuff up, a wheelbarrow up a hill, because that's some of the stuff they did way back in the day, and there was no standard equipment. Nobody had a log. Nobody had a tire. Nobody had any of that stuff. Stones, Atlas stones, nobody owned one of those.
Yeah.
Right? And so we go down there, and because there were no contests, you had this wide range of people. 17 people showed up to the thing. There were people that nobody really knew about, like me. There was Andrew Bull Stewart was there, was a 10-time national and 8-time world powerlifting champion.
Dang.
Former NFL football player, and he weighed about 250, was maybe 6 feet tall, but he was fast and strong, and he had an 850 deadlift, I think, and a 800 plus squat.
Ooh,
550 bench.
Strong.
Strong, fast, athletic guy. Ode Hogan was there. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Mm-hmm. Well, he was competing, and he was in his 40s at the time. I was 28, and he was living in Hawaii, so he flew in for that, and some other dudes. Just a wide range of people. And we're like, I don't know what to do here. So we show up, and the keg lift goes first. And this is where I realized, much like in football, my athleticism was ahead of most people's. My strength was not. So I probably wasn't as strong as a lot of those guys, but I was one of the top guys in the keg lift overhead. Guys were struggling to try to get it up to their shoulders or whatever, and the first one was like 155. I just watched them and go, these guys are making this harder than I'm just going to snatch it overhead. So I did. And no catching it. It was like a power snatch. I just pulled it from the ground, threw it right over my head, didn't squat under it, nothing, just go. And it was like, people like, whoa. And I think the heaviest one they had was like a 210. So like 5 of us got the 210. So then we had to do the 2 for reps after that or something like that. So I don't remember what I ended third in that or something. But we started doing these different events. I think one of the events was a partial squat. So they had it set so you only squat the top 7 inches.
Oh, interesting.
Well,
okay.
I was not a good squatter, and I think partially because of my height. My hips are kind of narrow and tight. They always have been. And so getting down in the squat, I was never very balanced. I never felt good. The top part, really good, and that's probably why I was good at yoke carries and farmer's walks and stuff, because at the top part, I'm strong in that area. But when I get out of position, it's a little weird.
Yeah.
So the partial squat, I was one of the top guys, and I got like 1,170.
Dang.
And mind you, my top squat was probably 500. Actually, I hadn't done one in competition, but I'll bet it was in the low 500s is what I could squat.
Man, so you really
so it was way over where I should have been, strength-wise. The farmer's walk, they didn't have implements, so they had a pair of 150-pound dumbbells. So they roll,
Yeah.
And you pick them up, and I don't remember what the distance was. It wasn't that far, 100 feet or something, right? And I was watching people go, and some people were struggling to hang on. A lot of people were relatively slow. And Bull Stewart, he was leading all the events. He'd been he was near the top in most of them. And he goes, and I don't know what he ended up getting, like 8.5 seconds or something. And I looked at that and I was like, I feel like I can run with these, right? So I just picked him up and ran, and I got 8 seconds flat, and I won the thing.
Nice.
And he was pissed. Bull was like, nah, there's no way that guy was faster than me, you know? He's 300-something pounds. How is he faster than me? Just was, man. I'm just faster than you.
Yeah, you just ran for it.
Yep. So there were some cool things like that where out of those people, there were a number of events where it was clear that I was not in the same league with them. I think one of it, they had a deadlift. That was one of them. Maybe that was the next year, but I saw in one of my events that there was a deadlift. It was back of a truck, and it was set so that the bar was, where a deadlift bar would be, so pretty low on your mid shin.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to weigh 760. Now, like I told you before, my best deadlift at the time was like 550, something.
Yeah.
So I got a 0 on that. Pretty embarrassed. Couldn't even lift it. But that made me start training my deadlift because I knew I had to get better. Overall, I ended up 4th out of those 17. Barely missed out on 3rd place.
Wow.
And, I was a 2nd in the speed ones. I was 1st in the farmer's walk, 2nd in the wheelbarrow, which was 300 feet up a hill with like 400 pounds in a wheelbarrow or something. But I was running, so I could do that. And I barely lost to Bull Stewart on that one. And so I was like, if I could just get my deadlift up here, I just need to get stronger. And so that kind of started me being excited, not both about Strongman, and seeing that I'm actually pretty good at this. I'm a lot better at Strongman than I am at powerlifting, basically, at that point. But I wanted a deadlift. And then I started training, and in early 99, I did my first deadlift contest. And I competed against a guy named Philip Daniels, who was the starting defensive end for the Seahawks at the time.
Oh, man.
6'6", 285 pounds, chiseled muscle, very athletic. And he was in my weight class, and we're both doing the deadlift. And he trained in a powerlifting gym over in Seattle at the time. And so I didn't know he actually did competitions. It wasn't his first one. And I was like, most I did in the gym was 605, so that was going to be my opening lift.
Mm-hmm.
And I go in there, and number one, I remember when we were back there in the warm-up rooms, and he said to one of his trainers, he's like, there's no way that guy weighs 305, which is what I weighed at the time. And the guy goes, yeah, he does. But he was thinking, this is a guy, he only weighed 287, and he looked more muscular because he was taller, but there was not an ounce of fat on his body, so he was ripped. And so he couldn't believe that someone who looked not as ripped as him could be heavier. But
it's funny.
Anyway, so he ends up finishing at like 639, and I did 661 and won, and so I feel pretty good about that.
Nice. Yeah, the 661's a nice mark because that's the 300 kilo mark.
Exactly, and that's because they were using kilo plates, so I look at it and go, all right, I'll take that one.
Yeah, the 300. Yeah, whenever, especially around the world, that's a good number.
Mm-hmm.
The 661, the 300.
Yep.
So you continue competing in strongman and powerlifting after that time. And take me to 2006, where you faced Brian Shaw, who's brand new in strongman. And where are you at this point?
So 2006 was the last year I competed in strongman. The first contest the one where I beat him was January, so I wasn't quite 36, but I've been doing it for a while. And the problem since 2004, I'd been traveling around trying to get my pro card. I'd done a few different pro qualifiers, and none of them were very close to home. And so you're traveling here, you're traveling there. The nationals I did in 2004 were done at Atlanta at the GNC Show of Strength. That's a whole different story, and that was one of my coolest contests ever in 2004, the nationals. But leading up to that, since then, I'd done a few more. And in 2006, I was like, all right, I need to turn pro now. I want to get in that World's Strongest Man. But I'm getting a little older, and my wife was pregnant with our third, and I'm taking money away from the family to travel and do all these things. To what end? And at that point, I'd already figured out. I'd been around some top powerlifters and strongmen who were at the top of the game, and unlike Brian Shaw, back in those days, there wasn't a lot of social media, and people weren't making any money.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, the number 2 guy in the world was from the Northwest, and I talked to him one time about and he's excited about how much money he was making, and he told me, and it was half of what I was making. And I was like, I think I'm going to tell my wife I'm quitting my job and I'm going to cut my paycheck in half so that I can be a pro strongman. No, that's not happening, So I realized that that's not really a realistic thing. If I want to do it to be successful because I want to achieve something cool, but it's not a career goal, right?
Yes.
So I have to balance that a little bit. So I go to the Monsters of the Midwest in St. Louis, Missouri. Dion Wessels was putting it on. And I don't know if everybody knows who she is, but her and Willie, her husband at the time, I want to say her last name is Masters now, maybe. But she ran the national strongman for the United States. Her and her husband did. And so they were the ones that did both the amateur and pro strongman for the whole United States, the national championships and all that. So they're doing this one. They were living in St. Louis at the time, so they're putting this on, the Monsters of the Midwest. And I was one of the favorites coming in, so I was feeling pretty good about it. And I knew one or two of the other guys. So we go there, and my younger brother went with me, and we're warming up and doing our stuff and going through the events. And this tall guy introduced himself, Brian Shaw, just wanted to ask some questions and stuff. I want to say he was like 24, and I was like 36,
Yeah.
So he may have done a contest or two before, but he was relatively early on. He was still 6'8", but I'll bet he might have been 300 pounds, but on a tall frame, it didn't look as big. Certainly not what he ended up being, 400 plus.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, he was, and I believe he used to be a college basketball player. Really nice guy. We hit it off. We were like hanging out the whole time. A really cool guy. Like, oh, I like this guy. He's my friend, and we kind of hung out. He was a very cool guy. And I don't remember where he finished, but I know I was ahead of him and I was beating him on the stuff. I want to say I was like third, and he might have been sixth or seventh or something like that. But I could be wrong on where exactly he placed, but it was behind me. And I actually was doing really well on some of the stuff. I ended up, I think, first or second on the yoke carry, which was a 900-pound arch built like the St. Louis arch.
Yeah.
And then I had just a little bar across it, and I did that like 13 seconds or something. And then I was always fast with the heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And we did a silver dollar deadlift, and I think I ended up with like 900 pounds on that. And then we did a log lift, 300 pounds for reps, all the way down and all the way up every rep. And that one was actually pretty easy to get it overhead the first couple times. But that's where I realized strength, I had gotten much stronger, but I wasn't as athletic, and I was definitely not in as good a shape as I was when I was younger. So I kind of switched from being the guy who wasn't quite as strong but could run circles around everybody to being the one who was getting gassed really easy.
Yeah.
And so I ended up with like only 6 reps on that, and it was great until I hit about my 5th, and then all of a sudden I just couldn't breathe, And the same thing happened when we got to the stones, and they had a setup where there was like 8 stones, And so again, you could make them heavier and it'd be just fine. But by the time I'm getting to the 6th stone, it's like, man, I can't breathe anymore.
Yeah.
So there were a number of those. I was disappointed in my conditioning, and that was the biggest part of that one. And at the time, I didn't think anything about Brian Shaw other than he's a really nice guy. We just had a good time. And it was 6 months later, we competed again in Utah for the Utah Strongest Man. And they had a pro and a amateur amateur contest there. And we were in the amateur one, and then the winner of the amateur would turn pro and then would compete with the pros the next day. And on that one, he beat me. That's the one he turned pro at. And I was disappointed in that. I still had the conditioning problem, but even bigger than that, it was a very grip dominant contest, and that was my weakness. My grip's okay, but when you get to the thick bars and the smooth bars, my fingers aren't super long, and so I have a problem with those. And of course, Brian Shaw was built for that. His hands are gigantic, right?
Yes.
And so we had things from like the frame carry was 800-pound frame carry. I was like, sweet, no problem. Except it was like 2-inch thick bar with no knurling and no straps. Mm-hmm. And so, we were tied at the time, so we were side by side on that one. And normally I think I could have beat him on that if I could have held on to it.
Yeah.
It kept slipping. I kept dropping, and I was so mad. So he was still a nice guy. And at the end of it, because I won the log lift overhead, and I would have won the deadlift medley, but again, my grip, I could have used straps. I chose not to because I figured it would slow me down. Should have used straps because then I wouldn't have had to repeat the 700-pounder. But
yeah.
So the little things like that where I messed up, he won. But at the end, I remember him telling me, well, you'll be there soon. And little did he know I wasn't going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, hopefully you'll do well. And he obviously did.
Yeah. So, he ended up having one of the greatest careers of all time. I mean, probably, definitely top three, probably like two behind Zadrunas is like
Yeah.
the best of all time.
And the other thing about him, especially, is he did a really good job. He did a good job competitively, but he did a really good job of building a business out of it, which very few people have been able to do successfully.
Yes.
And he kind of set the model for, because part of it was obviously the social media stuff, and he did a lot of that. But he was also very marketable, and he got a lot of sponsors, and he definitely completely embraced the business side of things, to where he, along with some of the other top people at the time, have shown you actually can make money if you do this right. But it's not completely based upon how well you do in competition. It's a lot. You have to be one of the top guys, but you don't have to be the top guy.
Yes. Yeah. It's also who you know a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's also his personality plays really well.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy. He's a relatable guy.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, companies are comfortable supporting a guy that they think is, I can sell this to my family. People can say, this is a guy, let's like this guy. He's not vulgar. He's not aggressive, abusive. He's the guy that people want to put their brand on.
Yeah, he really is like the definition of a teddy bear,
Mm-hmm.
where you do have this giant 6'8", like at his biggest, I think he was over 450.
Yep.
And his forearms just 19 inches. He's just
Yeah.
enormous. But yeah, in his videos, you're totally right. Like, yeah, he's not vulgar. He's very polite, very nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so thank goodness, because if he wasn't, then people would be in trouble.
Sure. But he definitely is the model for how to take your success and make the most out of it.
Yeah, true. Now, with all your weightlifting experience over, because you're still trained, so
Mhm.
you've been training for decades now, what would you say some of the biggest, or maybe the biggest mistake people make when it comes to strength training would be?
I think one of the biggest pitfalls that people have is expecting too much too soon. And it shows itself in a lot of different ways, right? Number one, it's motivation. And I've been like I said, I've been as guilty as anybody, because that's why I thought I was going to quit like every couple of years throughout my whole career, because I'm working really hard. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm not getting any stronger. I think I've reached my peak at 24. I think when I reached my peak at 30, everybody knows when you're 30, you're done. So you might as well just stop. And I've had to, and usually the only reason I found out is I liked it. I liked doing what I do. So I couldn't just leave it alone. I'd be like, that's it, I'm going to quit. And then you end up coming back because I want to do it. I like doing it. And so you play around with it a little bit and you start seeing some results, and then you go for it again. So I don't know that I can say that's what I did, but what I realize is if you expect to be able to come in the gym and break a record, be the strongest guy, be the most fit person, I think that's why, people selling different kind of supplements and gear and stuff make so much money, because everybody wants it to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about that actually with someone this morning, is that they said, someone came up to them and goes, so like, I don't remember what they were asking about, but what kind of creatine do you use, or whatever disc do you use, or whatever that, and what should I do to get stronger? And it's like, well, first just go to the gym and start getting comfortable, learning the exercise and sticking with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what do I take? So don't even worry about that. And I think everybody wants to get, even the people that are using every performance-enhancing drug and every kind of equipment, knee wraps, whatever they're using to get as strong as they can. If they're at the top, those are all the little things at the end that help get them to that final step.
Mm-hmm.
But they still have to put in years and years of really hard work and really consistent dedication, and deal with trying to avoid injury and trying to find ways to improve along the way. Nobody gets there. You can get pretty far with just that alone, without all the extra stuff. Mm-hmm. And if someone only does the pill, the shot, the special shirt, whatever, they're not going to get very far at all. It doesn't work that way. As a matter of fact, you get a lot farther without it, but working hard, than the other way around.
100%. Oh yeah, we definitely live in a society where people want it fast, they want it now, and there's all these shortcuts, and you just go on YouTube.
Alleged shortcuts, because they actually don't get you there.
Oh yeah, it's like, how to get rich fast and how to get jacked fast and all these little things, and really what those things turn into is they're more of just optimizing, but where the actual work is done is you actually training, you actually being in the gym, working out hard, pushing yourself.
And it's consistency over time.
Yes.
Because when I look back at my career, even at times I'll think, oh, I remember in those years I really got strong fast. And I've gone back and looked at my logbooks and been like, actually, no, I had a lot of off workouts, a lot of that weren't great in between. And it was just over the course of year after year after year. Years ago, I've had a lot of these weird encounters over the year, but years ago, I remember I was in a drive-thru getting some food, and I pull up to the drive-thru, and the person in the drive-thru goes, "Oh my goodness, those are the biggest arms I've ever seen. How long? He said, how did you get those?" And I said, 35 years of consistent effort.
Yep.
Because that's what they want to hear is what did you take or what special exercise did you do? I just kept working and working and working for year after year, decade after decade. That's what I did because it didn't come quick. I was scrawny when I started lifting.
Yes.
It didn't come quick.
Yeah, because I feel like some people, and it's not necessarily their fault, they don't really look into lifting a lot. They're looking from the outside and they're not experts. And so I think a lot of times what they're expecting to hear is, well, I started, most guys do their curls this way. Mm-hmm. I actually changed my wrist this way.
And made all the difference.
Biggest difference. And people are like, whoa, I need to do that too. But yeah, just like you said, it's really just consistency. Like I tell people, like if you find the strongest guy in your gym or the biggest guy in your gym, ask him how long he's been lifting. Odds are it'll almost always be over 10 years.
Yep.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Because, consistency over time leads to just the most amount of gains possible.
The interesting thing about that is, too, is I was listening, not to get too far off, what other people do, but I heard a person talking about how they're going to go for the bench record. And their philosophy, they were already pretty strong. And they thought, well, I'm going to give myself 2 years. And the reason they were going to give themselves 2 years was because they were going to amp up their PED use to the point that it would almost kill them. Their words, right? By then they should be able to make that last little difference to do that. But then I have to stop because I got a wife and kids and I got all these different things. And I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty crazy that you're. But I look at it and I go, that's why a lot of those guys who come along, they will hit a height. Some of those guys will hit a certain height and they're like, bam, I was there. And then they're gone. Whether they die young, and I've known a number of guys like that. The guy that I won't go into his name, but there's a guy I know that for years as one of the top strongmen from the area that I'd go to contests and either compete against him or he was a judge at, and we'd talk. He died at 27 from a heart attack.
Dang.
He left a wife and kid behind. And people will push a lot of things to try to get things too fast. And when you just do it from consistent effort over time, it lasts longer. So I'm 55, I'll be 56 in a few months. I got plenty of aches and pains. I have a hip replacement. It's not like everything's been smooth sailing all along, but I'm still pretty strong and I can still get in the gym and lift weights and look like I lift weights. And a lot of guys my age don't.
Yeah.
Or some of those guys who were at a higher level than I was earlier have either stopped lifting, gotten out of shape, or in some cases died.
Yep. Yeah, I was talking with someone just the other day because you were talking about like aches and pains that you get. Mm-hmm. And I told him, here's my philosophy. Either you work out and you kind of beat yourself up a little bit and you have aches and pains, or you don't work out and you just get older and you get aches and pains. Like either way, like I have buddies who don't train and they're in their 40s and like, a low shoulder problem here. Oh, I kind of jacked up my back when I was moving the couch, and that was 2 years ago, and it's still kind of iffy. And so to me, it's really like, well, I'm going to choose to be the guy who's, a little more jacked, a little stronger, and have some injuries. Not to mention, I feel like the quality of life is just better when you can move and you can do the things that you want to do.
For sure.
I mean, you're in way better shape than most guys in their mid-50s. Like I saw you in the gym. You did a trap bar deadlift. Like what was it? It was like 700-800 pounds. It was something like
I did 800 this last year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just massive. So I mean, like, if someone needs help,
I'm not supposed to do that. I have my hip replacement. I'm not supposed to lift heavy with my lower body, but every once in a while, you can't stop it. You have to.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
And then I'll stop for a while, and so I don't try to break anything. But
yeah, it's too addicting.
It is, and I try to. It's funny because I primarily focus on lifting the bench heavy now, and the only reason for that is that I had that hip replacement. I'm not supposed to. I don't want to wear it out and have to have another one. And so I still will do some trap bar deadlifts sometimes. I'll do some squat stuff. I try not to do very much with it. And so it's tough. You have to challenge yourself, and the bench is the one area that I can still challenge myself for now. but
Yeah.
but you still do it once in a while because it's tough. Like deadlift was my lift for a while. That was the one that made me, truly national or world class. Bench was okay, but it was the deadlift that put me up there. And to have to give that up kind of sucked.
Yeah, man. Well, I can't imagine that. I'm sorry, man. That's gotta be hard. I mean, I've had to give up a few lifts, but like temporarily, for months or like a year at a time. But yeah, that's definitely hard for really long term.
Yep.
Now, I want to finish off with just some fun questions.
Okay.
And I ask these to pretty much everyone, but it's always fun to hear what different stories people have to say, different insights. Have you ever had any embarrassing gym fails or any crazy gym injuries?
I'm sure I have had the gym fails. One of my weird injuries actually I've had a couple of injuries, so I'll go over that were kind of weird ones that nobody probably would have noticed. One, and I guess one of them was embarrassing, so there we go. That we'll hit the both. One of them was my last workout before the Olympia. I mentioned that I hurt my back. It was on a warm-up. It was on my last deadlift workout about 10 days before, and I usually in those days would go, 225, 405, 585, maybe 675, and then, just bump up like that until I'd get to my 800, whatever I was going to do. And I feel like I did my 225, no problem. And I was like on my second rep with 405, which again, when you're going up to 800 is nothing, right? And on my way up, my back have you ever seen like sheet metal just go whop, kind of flat back? That's what it felt like. And it almost sounded like in my ear. Oh. I don't know what it was, but I just dropped like, oh, I'm in so much pain. Went and sat down and like, I don't know what I just did to my back, but I'm thinking I'm done. And I had already paid for the Olympia and was going to go there. And I just sat there for a while, and then I go, well, I got 10 days. I guess we'll see how I'm feeling. I'm going to go regardless. I want to watch, but I think just maybe I'll rest and I'll be able to do something. I felt better when I was warming up when I got there. I was, in the hot tub trying to stretch out, trying to make sure everything was ready. And in the warm-up, it didn't hurt, but I could tell I didn't have that same strength, same pop.
Yes.
And so I was still able to open up with 805 and get it, but it was a struggle when it should have been nothing.
Yeah.
And then 821, I think I went second, and right at the top of the deadlift. I actually have a picture with that they took that looks like I locked it out. Must have been the split second right before I dropped it, right? Because I'm holding it there, and my back did the same thing. And I was in pain and dropped it like I'm done.
Dang.
So that was a kind of a weird injury. I don't know where it came from. Well, I do now. That's how I found out I needed a hip replacement. Half my hip joint was missing, and so just it was eaten away at. So half of it was gone, and it was catching on my hip, which I knew in a sense that I couldn't use my left leg. I had to have my wife or kids put my sock and shoe on for about 2 years leading up to that. Like before I'd go to work, before I'd do it, I couldn't reach my foot. And then I would have them put the shoe on, and then I'd bend down in bed to deadlift 800 pounds, right? And because of that, my hip girdle was shifting and contracting in my back. And so my back was twisted in a weird way, and that's why that ended up happening. And that was kind of so that's why the Olympia was my last deadlift contest, because that's when I found out, oh, you got to get surgery and you can't lift heavy anymore.
Man, oh.
The other embarrassing one I'll hit real quick was, it was many years earlier. I was in a gym doing, I don't know if I was doing bent rows or whatever, and I started feeling some pain, and I didn't know what it was. And I sat down on the incline bench and tried to clear my head. And next thing I know, I had a cut on my head, and I was laying on the ground, and people were trying to give me water and stuff. I had somehow passed out, hit my head on the calf machine, and my back I threw out my back doing something. I didn't even remember what happened, other than it was a similar situation where it just felt weird like that. I had to get a ride home, and I was crawling around on the floors for like a week afterwards. We didn't go to the doctor. I was living overseas, and they don't really have good health care over there. So
yeah, man. Oh, well, that's crazy. That's a crazy story. Now, what's the worst piece of gym advice that you've ever heard or received?
Man, there's some bad ones out there. Oh, geez. I don't know if I can come up with one. I don't know if I can come up with the specific advice.
This isn't advice, but I'll tell you a trend I just became aware of just recently.
Okay.
Apparently, it is a thing now for people to lift weights in saunas. So you're in 180 degrees and lifting weights. So absolutely nuts.
Yeah,
Because
that's
I was
not
like,
smart.
yeah, because could you imagine pushing yourself while it's already 180? Like your body's not going to be able to perform at a
No.
high level when you're roasting in there.
Yeah, that's not good.
And it's like, I wonder if the people feel better because they're sweating more, so it makes them feel more productive, even though that.
I think sometimes people just try to find something new just to be different, whether it's just spice up their own workouts because I'm trying something different, or they just like the attention of looking weird. I mean, I used to like to do extreme stuff and get people to do it, like doing sets of 120 on the leg press or whatever, not because it was going to, and the partial reps too, not because it was going to necessarily make us stronger, but it push you to extreme pain and muscle cramping and get other people to do it, and then they watch them cry and laugh about it.
That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes you just do stuff for fun, but man, yeah, I heard that was a trend, and I was like, what the heck? Like, if anyone were to ever give anyone advice, that would be possibly some of the worst I've heard, that's for sure.
There was a workout I did in the mid-'90s with my brother that we read in a magazine. It was called German Volume Training. And I don't think that ever actually works. Certainly not for strength, but it was for bodybuilding. And I'd say certainly not for any kind of a natural athlete. But it was doing 12 sets of 12. And so you'd pick antagonistic muscles, let's say hack squats, and you're going to do leg curls for the other one. And you do 4 sets of 12 of one, then the other. And you go back and forth until you've done 12 sets of 12 of each of them. So 144 reps. And you rest just long enough for the other person to switch. So it's back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Dang.
And I remember we would do that, and we'd keep a little bucket nearby in case we had to puke. And I remember going to work later in the day, and my legs would just be spasming all over the place. Just all these muscle spasms all over the place, cramping up and making it difficult to walk. And we did it because we thought, well, it was supposed to make us big and strong. It didn't. We lost weight, and it made us really sore. So it was more an interesting story to tell than anything else. Effective training, I think not.
Yeah, that's funny. I can't remember if my wife and I were just dating or we were engaged, but one time we were FaceTiming because she lived here in Spokane. I lived in Vancouver, and I'd done one of the hardest leg workouts I'd ever done. And my background is all wrestling, so I'm used to pushing myself.
Yeah.
And looking back, I realized, maybe sometimes I push myself maybe a little too hard, at least when I was going for strength. When I was going for hypertrophy, I think I was probably doing what I should. And anyway, I'm FaceTiming my wife, and I'm in a bunk bed. It's like the top bunk, and below is a desk. So there's not actually a second bed. So I'm up on the bunk bed, and all of a sudden my quads just cramped. Both of them just boom. And I'm FaceTiming her, and I just yell. I was like, no! And I drop my phone, and it falls, and I can't get to my phone. So the last thing that my then girlfriend or fiance, now wife, hears is me yelling, and I can't get to the phone because my quads are just going crazy, and I'm up on the bed.
Yeah.
I'm like, so I start bending them, trying to figure it out. I try to go down the ladder, and they keep cramping. So I don't know, it's maybe like 40 seconds before I can get to my phone. She has no idea what's going on, and she's like terrified, like, oh my goodness, like what is going on? And I legitimately, if I even got close to straightening my leg, it would just boom, it would just hit.
She didn't yet know that that's just part of being with someone who lifts weights.
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah, happens. Just a couple more here. If you could challenge one gym myth in a televised debate, which myth would you pick?
That there's one best way to do things.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that bothers me the most is how many people are so adamant that there's one way to do things, or that their way is best. And in my experience, everybody's so different on the way their body reacts to things, and whether it's the length of their bones, their joints, their flexibility level, and whether it's, but everybody's body just responds differently for a variety of other reasons. And people get so caught up in that this is the way to train, or this is the way, or this is the better exercise, or if you need to accomplish this. I think one of the things that's helped me be successful over the years is not just consistency, although it's a big one. It's constantly evaluating and reevaluating what I'm doing not to find the secret exercise, but to find how to deal with the issue I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's a different exercise, sometimes it's a little rest, sometimes it's a different order of doing things. There's so many different possibilities and ways to do things. And the biggest key, I mentioned consistency over time being the thing that helps you be successful. And the way that happens is you like what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you get stuck into a rigid thing, I remember years ago saying that everybody would say in bodybuilding, if you don't squat, you'll never get big. Well, that's clearly not true, as many bodybuilders have shown over the years.
100%.
Or if you need to squat to have a better squat in a contest. Maybe. But what I've seen over the years is some people are better deadlifters than squatters, and some people are better squatters than deadlifters because of their mechanics. And a good deadlifter can get better at the squat by deadlifting than if they're squatting, and vice versa a lot of times. You'll see a lot of great squatters that don't spend much time on the deadlift other than working their grip, because they work on getting as strong as they can in the squat and then just work on that grip or work on some technique stuff. The strength is built through the squat. And deadlifters will do the same thing because it's an awkward position for them. And a lot of people, not everybody does that, but I think there's a lot of people that just say, well, there's one way to do it. I personally found out after a while, and a lot of it was probably my hip and back issues, but I figured out as I got stronger that I could only do one of those a week, squat or deadlift, not both. And so every Wednesday I would squat one week, deadlift the next, and I would bench twice a week, early in the like Tuesdays and Fridays or something like that.
Yeah.
And or some related exercise. And a lot of people say that's not enough. How are you getting stronger? You need to do it multiple times a week. I couldn't tell you why it works that way, but it works for me, and that's when I had my best progress.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it makes sense. Plus, the more advanced you become, the more your training will change over time.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
It does. You figure out what works for you, and you stick with it, make little adjustments. You're not stabbing in the dark for totally different ways of doing things. You've already kind of figured out what works.
Totally. Well, one last question. If you could give your beginner self one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would tell myself what I've figured out eventually is that do the lifting for fun and take the success as it comes rather than doing it for the success, doing it to hit certain numbers or to be a champion or whatever. These days, I competed, a year ago just because I wanted to do something at a certain age to say I did it. I actually prefer just lifting in the gym at this point in my career. I learned years ago, even when I was competing, I wouldn't compete in just raw, even though there were very few of those. That didn't even exist most of the time. But I might lift raw and compete raw, but I didn't care if I was going against the guys that were equipped or tested or not tested. It didn't matter. My goal was I wanted to hit my numbers.
Yeah.
And I don't really care what anybody else is doing, because that's the one thing I can control is I want to get stronger than I am. And when I realized, so that's what I tell myself when I was young, look at the goals that you have that you can control and work on getting better every day, and you'll be happier. I was always happier getting a PR, even if I lost, than winning and not getting a PR.
Totally, yes. That's one thing that I remember. I did a couple powerlifting meets years ago, and yeah, that was huge. Like hitting a PR in the competition, like that feels so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you're either progressing or not. I can't control who else shows up or whatever else happens. But if I'm getting better than I was before, little by little, and I proved that over the years from being a really weak guy who couldn't bench press his body weight to, doing what I did later in my career, not because I had some, magic gift or whatever, but because I just kept working on getting a little bit better.
Yep. Well, that's a great note to end on. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Aaron, for coming in. Really appreciate it. It's great to have you
anytime.
on.